We're going to dance. We're going to dance. We're going to dance and have some fun.
Hi, I'm Siobhán Fletcher and welcome back to a brief history of Pride. Last time we went back to the early 90s, but this time we're jumping forward a few decades to hear about what went into organising the first public Pride held here at home.
When we're done, satisfaction of what's to come. I couldn't ask for another.
But first, let's set the scene. In 1992, like we heard about in the last episode, Tynwald decriminalised homosexuality, but the age of consent was set at 21, as was the case for many years over in the UK. In 2001, this was lowered to 18, and in 2006, it was lowered again to 16, as is the case for heterosexuals. In 2016, same-sex marriage was legalised here, and in 2020, then Chief Minister Howard Quayle issued an unqualified public apology to gay men convicted of same-sex offences under those previous Manx laws.
Today, as Chief Minister, I stand before you, before this House and before the people of our island, to apologise for those laws. For the damage they may have caused and for the lives they ruined, I am sorry for that wrong.
It was described as a great day for the Isle of Man by campaigner Alan Shea. 2 years later, the Sexual Offences and Obscene Publications Act came into effect, which pardoned historical gay sex offences committed prior to 1992. And the then Chief Constable Gary Roberts also apologised. We'll look more closely at this next week. Like we touched on at the beginning of this series, the LGBTQ+ community has always made safe spaces for its members to be free. And the Isle of Man is no different. Before the pageantry of the two Isle of Pride events, there were other private prides marked out of the public eye. They were held primarily in back gardens and houses around the island and were exclusive to the community they served.
Alan Shea, Isle of Man. It was done by invitation only. But the man that organised them did really well because it's a bit dangerous having a pride in those days on the island.
I am singer and actress Vida Fierce. The idea of a private one is beautiful. It's lovely. It's getting together in a safe place, and that's beautiful is the getting together thing. But you want one that's public because, like I said, the act of the party is a statement in itself, and it is a protest in itself. So it's like, here we are having a fantastic time. Everybody is welcome. Just don't bring trouble. But everybody is welcome. Come along, have fun, and that's where the bigger, more public ones really come into their own, because even if you've got some bigoted people who are like, pride, who don't want to come, no one's forcing you to come. If you want to miss out on some good fun and some really good entertainment, then fine, that's on you. But it's the fact that it's visible, and it's having that visibility, which is a sign in itself. That is an act of protest, having that visibility. And it's also like, hey, here we are completely normal. We just want to, have a nice day out, listen to some good music, have some nice food, maybe have a few drinks. We are just like you. But, there's some bright colours and a lot of fun. And that is a statement in itself. So even people from outside who don't want to come can see that we are just normal people, just having some fun. There's always the predictable thing that you see on social media of, when's straight pride? It's like, well, the other 364 days of the year. But also be thankful you've never needed one. Anyone who can't see a reason for pride is ironically the reason for it.
I knew when you told me you don't want to go home tonight.
In 2020, the island saw its first Youth Pride event, attended by more than 200 young people. And in 2021, the Isle of Man held its first public Pride event at the Villa Marina Gardens in Douglas.
It's 1 o'clock, time for news with Tessa Hawley. Faster my Tessa.
Faster my.
The organisers of the Isle of Man's first Pride Festival say they've had tremendous support from the Manx community. The event is taking place in the Villa Marina Gardens today. It's been organised by the charity Isle of Pride and was originally due to take place last year but had to be postponed due to COVID-19.
The island's original singing drag queen, Vida Fierce, was one of the members of the Isle of Pride committee, which organised the celebration. Can you just tell me a bit about what went into sort of the original idea and how we got to that first public
The original
pride?
idea, I think, was Claire and I having a coffee, like at the very beginning, like probably getting on for like 3 years ago, maybe more. And there'd obviously been a desire certainly from both of us to see it happen, and then sort of like a team kind of came together as if by magic. And it was such a good team as well. It was just such a joy to work with these people who you could see every meeting how passionate they all were about making it happen and making it happen correctly as well. There was no cutting corners. There was every level of planning and like all sorts of contingency stuff and the detail that went into it. And I felt privileged to be a part of a group like that because there was that passion and the kindness and this amazing drive to make it happen. And the people who were really, 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 in on the committee really worked so hard that it was a delight to be part of.
The Isle of Pride charity consisted of a wide-ranging mix of people from different professional and personal backgrounds. They included government ministers Claire Barber and Jane Poole-Wilson.
They were both amazing events, but there's no question that putting an event like that on is a huge undertaking, and so those complementary skills are really valuable. So we had people who had sort of marketing and PR, that comms type skills, because that was really important, but also there's a huge amount of fundraising and financial management that has to go on. So again, people who are able to write sponsorship materials, engage with potential sponsors, manage our finances as well. And then organisationally, I mean, we took the view in the end that to make sure we ran a really good event, we would actually engage with companies that are used to putting on events and that have that specialisms around risk management and how to do large scale events. So we did do that, but there was, again, just a lot of logistics, liaising. I mean, even down to things like applying for a licence to run the event. So yes, it required a lot of people doing a lot of different things, but there's no question that everybody's different skills that they could bring makes a difference. And we definitely found that the more people doing more things could help us achieve more. But yeah, a huge undertaking. On the day, fabulous. In the run up to the day, you've seen swans swimming along and paddling frantically. I think we were flapping and splashing frantically to get it over the line.
Yeah, and even afterwards, of course, because you've got the absolute adrenaline rush that it's worked, and there's that moment. Certainly in the first year, it was really quite profound. Just being able to stand in the Villa Marina Gardens and just see all of the people who were there and what it had meant to so many people, and know that we'd succeeded. And then you're exhausted, you hit that wall, midnight, it finishes, you go home, but you've got to be back at 10 a.m. the next morning to help to clear down the strip down, sorting out the lost property, doing the stock takes on the merchandise and getting everything stored away, helping collapse down gazebos and so on. So it's not a case of, we did use event management, and they provided a huge amount of that really fundamental resource for us that we just wouldn't have been able to cope without. But there was a huge amount that also required us being there and being available. And I think social media makes that as well even more difficult, because you're constantly getting messages before the event, certainly, and some afterwards. And you're trying to manage that and just keep a rick on all of that. So we needed people with time as well. And that's certainly, it's a big ask of people. We know how much people give to charity in time, in money, even actually on the Isle of Man. People are incredibly generous. But it's making sure we're using that time and commitment that they offer and making sure we're making that work well for them and for us.
Another member of the Isle of Pride committee was Zoe Bennett, who originally got into contact with Claire Barber over a constituency issue and ended up becoming a key player in organising the historic event.
I very much took a broad approach to it. We did have a number of people on the committee who really did sort of push, and were instrumental in getting it together, but I was kind of the one who, had the spreadsheets and made sure we did this, that, and the other. And it was a case of, hey, we've got to make sure we've got it registered in charity. We've got to make sure that the bank accounts, we've got to get an accountant, we've got to get a lawyer. We've got to make sure that we've got insurances in place. That's before we even thought about putting a show on, and putting acts on. We had to make sure that we had the legal and the financial backing first. Once we were once we decided how we were going to play this and what Isle of Pride was going to be. And it wasn't just about being the day out. It was also about, creating safe spaces for people to be able to meet or to just hang out and be themselves. Once we kind of got a bit of a mission statement, I hate that phrase, but a mission statement together, we were like, right, okay, what do we need? And then it was a case of connecting with prides across the UK and Ireland and further afield about, how do we go about this? What advice can you give us? So I had my finger in all the pies, as it were, in terms of legal, financial, and then, entertainment, venues, who to contact. I had spreadsheets upon spreadsheets going. So yeah, it was a lot to juggle.
So when you then see that it is a success and thousands of people have turned out and it's been received really positively, what was your feeling on the day?
I actually wasn't there because I'd left the island by then. So I had to watch from afar. It was fantastic. But then the year after, myself and my partner and my family, we joined the march along the promenade and into the villa, and just coming in and seeing all the people and everything. It was quite emotional. And I did get a little bit choked up. I'm not going to lie. It was a pretty cool thing to see.
Now, if you attended the first Manx Public Pride, I'm sure you'll remember some of the imagery from that day. It was a gorgeous sunny day here on the Rock, and there was pure joy in the air. Compared by performer Jack Divers and Manx Radio's own Christy de Haven, those who headed down to the villa were treated to enlightening conversations, poetry and performances by the island's drag acts, the Pride Choir and Twisted Angels, amongst others. But first, a march headed down Strand Street featuring placards with key moments in Manx history and a huge 50-metre-long rainbow flag. The villa even got a facelift for the occasion. What went into the ideas, I guess, on that very first one? I think there was a big focus on the history of the Isle of Man. I mean, we had that amazing big rainbow flag that went down Strand Street, and everyone had placards, and it was a lot of, this is the history. What went into coming up with those sorts of ideas?
Well, I think Claire will talk about her visit to Guernsey Pride. So we were, and the challenge of not only getting the massive flag here from the Channel Islands, but also getting it back again. So yeah, I think there was inspiration, I guess, from many quarters. Obviously, Pride as a known event, we could draw on that. But I think you're right that particularly for the Isle of Man and the Isle of Man's context, I think it was important to say this is the story and this is how we've got to today, and that was something very, very unique for the Isle of Man that I think was important to recognise on that first Pride. I think the other thing that, because as Claire's touched on, we knew we wanted it to be a community event, free and open to everybody, and we wanted to provide an experience that anybody and everybody could enjoy. So I think then in terms of thinking about what would be available during Pride, things like the family tent, as well as a range of food options, and then thinking about the acts and the different types of entertainment that would be on offer throughout the event. We were very focused on being inclusive, being open to all, and trying to offer something that people could genuinely come along to and enjoy themselves. And we're so fortunate, aren't we, on the Isle of Man, that, as I recall, we ummed and ahed about bringing a headline act over. And I think at the time we were still struggling with issues around travel, and so we didn't do that in the end. But we're so fortunate with the talent that's on the Isle of Man. And yeah, Christy and Jack Divers hosting the day for us. I mean, it's a bit of a danger spot, I think, to start to going into naming individuals, because we will never manage to name everybody who contributed and really made a difference to the event. But you're right, our local talent and everybody who pulled together, that also helped us make the event, I guess, what it was.
Yeah. And Zoe very early on got us involved as well with the UK Pride Organisers Network, and she went away to their annual conference, so she got to create links with people from all over the place who were putting on other prides, and she linked in as well with Europon, which is the European Pride Organisers Network. Which just allowed us to capture some of the challenges, some of the opportunities, get some ideas. It actually, lockdown provided an opportunity because we had a year's delay from when Pride was first going to happen. COVID sadly put a stop to the first year, but it did allow us some reflection time. So we had everything pretty much ready to go, but we got an extra year that allowed us to go away and then sense check some of that. And with the direct flight to Guernsey that was put on, a group of us, which I was included in, went over to Guernsey Pride and saw what they did. And one of the things they have is the huge 50-metre flag, which they've had custom made, and it's actually got names of people who put money in towards it in the early days. And they said while we were there, well, if you wanted to borrow it, you could. So we were like, wow.
You're like, yes, great.
So we got the permission to have the flag. The actual sending of the flag was challenging, and actually became even more challenging in year 2 because there was changes around the customs laws. And we ended up with quite a significant bill for the import of what I did point out was a second-hand flag that we were borrowing for 2 weeks for a charity, which should have been exempt, but because it had the wrong box ticked at the Guernsey end, the charity had no choice but to pay the bill to get the flag and then send it back. So we made sure they didn't get the same bill at the other end. We spent hours and hours on the phone trying to resolve this problem. But having the flag there and seeing the drone footage and photographs, I mean, I just think it's such a powerful and symbolic message. And, I certainly hope we see the day where we own one of those flags for ourselves on the Isle of Man, perhaps with the 3 legs embedded in it, just like we have for the flags on the promenade.
And I think having the flag in the run-up to Pride as well was brilliant because we could tour it. And so the footage and the photographs of the flag around landmark buildings and places on the Isle of Man is just, it was
That's
so
what
amazing.
I was going to mention, the shot of it up Tynwald Hill.
It nearly took it off, actually, on Tynwald Hill.
Yeah, it did. It's very windy that day.
We did do this one day. You don't realise how heavy 50 metres of fabric is. It's quite thick fabric until you're stood on Tynwald Hill with sort of 8 of you trying to pin it down. And we drafted Culture Van in it. I mean, anyone. In fact, I think the people came out of Green's tea rooms because they could see we were having something of a crisis with the flag. We also took it to the grandstand and we tipped it off the edge of the top of the grandstand to get footage. And the thing nearly flew away. Oh my goodness. I'm trying to think where else we took it. There was a few places we had.
It was up at Nobles. We took it to
Nobles,
the hospital.
it
was blowing around.
It was really billowing up there.
And the post office.
Yeah.
Went to the post office
and a
outside
few of
the post
the
office
key
headquarters.
sponsors. We had it wrapped round buildings, running through buildings. It was absolutely brilliant. And it was, it's something so visual that people can come and get involved in. So sponsors were really thrilled to have it come along. Both years we did that. So yeah, really exciting.
Is it bad that I think if my ship had flown away, oh no.
The funny thing is when you have it on a monument or like Tynwald Hill, it feels so long, especially when you're trying to control it. When you see it along the prom, for example, it's relatively small and you think, oh, we could have twice the size. And you think, no, rolling it up is just that.
We'll remind you of that. When Claire pushes for like 150 metre long one,
we'll remind her.
We'll play this back. How about that?
Yeah, definitely hold me back. I can see why it would be beautiful, but it would be wholly impractical. We'd be there doing paragliding across Douglas Bay.
Obviously, the Villa Marina, the walls outside the front were painted as a rainbow. How did you get it off?
So I'd got the idea actually when I went to Guernsey Pride. They'd painted just a small set of steps outside the grounds that they were using for their event, and it looked fabulous. And it was it was so Instagrammable, and I thought, wow, like this looks amazing. So I'd taken photos of the villa at different angles, and I'd been there with Microsoft Paint, filling it in, seeing what could work. And they'd given me the paint that they bought, this removable paint, and they said it's quite easy to get off. You just wet it, and when you scrub it after a few minutes, it just comes off, and you hose it down. Brilliant. So we'd spoken to the villa, and they'd agreed that we could paint pretty much whatever we wanted. Actually, they were really, really open-minded. So we thought, well, we'll do the columns. Not the colonnade, the columns at the front of the villa, the 4 striking big columns, and then we had enough paint, so we'd do the whole front as well. So Buchanan and Pitts came along and said that they would paint for us. And they're absolutely amazing. These guys turned up and they did a time lapse. It was absolutely stunning. And we got all the paint there, and everyone had their pictures taken with it.
Yep.
And looked absolutely brilliant. And then we had that thing we talked about, going back and having to do the clean down. So we're like, okay, so we need to go and get the paint off. So Buchanan and Pitts had said, again, kindly, that they would come along and get the paint off. We got this frantic phone call. I think they'd spent 12 hours with 2 people, and the paint had not lifted at all. So we then had various other people spend time down there. I went down myself, and we tried. This paint just would not shift. We tried everything to shift this paint. Just almost crying, thinking, I don't know what we're going to do. In the end, Buchanan and Pitts actually came. I have to give them a massive shout out because they did all of this for free. They came and repainted the columns at the front of the Villa Marina because it was easier than trying to remove the paint. And then the paint that was on the ground, we had to just soak it, scrub it. And we had loads of people in shifts down there. About 5 days, I think it took, to get the paint off. And there's still little bits of red you can see if you look around the light fittings that shine up the columns. And we did decide, I think we briefly mentioned it to the guys at the villa for the next year, and it was like, about the paint, they're like, absolutely no way,
No.
never.
But you know what? The villa looks great right now. It's really had that fresh coat of paint on it. It looks fantastic.
And actually then in year 2 we had the window stickers done instead, and I think that looked really effective as well. And we talked about you could get wraps and stuff for the columns for the future, which maybe would be slightly less paint. Yeah, I mean,
And the windows came off.
the window, not the actual
Easily.
windows, the
No, not
stickers.
this. The stickers on the windows came off.
I suppose
easily.
really Tim Baker's probably looking back with a wry smile, because I did try and convince him to paint a pedestrian crossing with this paint, and it had probably still have been there now.
Yeah. To be very fair to Claire, she was told, don't worry, it'll just wash off.
It is funny, the stuff that takes time. So between the paint and putting the flags up, because the flags they gave us a set of keys, and there's 20 keys, and you don't know which keys which flag post. So that's the first exciting little. It's a bit like Challenge Annika gone horribly wrong,
and
some
there's
of
no
them are
one thought
rusty.
to number the keys.
No, I don't, no, because there's about 4 keys that mostly work for all. It's not quite so methodical. And then when you open them, you've got a huge amount of balled up string. I mean, if anyone ever wanted to do that, it's quite entertaining to watch. But you have to get the string out, and then you have to lower the flag down. But a lot of the string runs out, and the flag's still halfway up the flagpole. So at one point, my sister was shimmying up these flagpoles, trying to change them, while I was holding on to the string for dear life. Because if I let go, the whole thing's gone. I've got no way of retrieving it. Or trying to try a bit of fishing line on, slowly hope we can get it back. The whole thing was an absolute debacle. But again, Buchanan and Pitts came to the rescue with their cherry picker, because you can just clip them off at the top of the flag columns, which was a lot easier. And the rest, as they say, is history. But yeah, certainly some of these little extra jobs, which took hours of our time, but looked fabulous.
And develops new skills, always.
I'm not sure they're transferable or for the CV.
No, I think what I'm learning here is we shouldn't put Claire in charge of, decorating. Maybe
Claire
a
is an
different person.
enthusiast. But the work that follows.
As they say, think big. It's like the 150-metre flag. Think big, regret later.
This is what I'm saying. Who brought the flag over? Let's remember this now, Jane. Who suggested the washable paint? And who's been trying to put flags up flagpoles?
Yes. We were all keen on the washable paint until it wouldn't wash off. But there we are. You live and learn.
You've been listening to the 3rd instalment of a special series exploring the history of Pride right here on Manx Radio. Next week, we'll be looking at the winding down of Isle of Pride and hear from some of the people who would like to see public Pride events held here in the future change.
Part of me was reluctant to get involved with something that I didn't feel was quite organised in the way that I should be. I talked to Alan Shea about it, and he sort of gave me his blessing, if you like.
The public pride in the Isle of Man, to me, they weren't really a pride. That was basically shows on a stage of gay LGBTQ people on the stage perform.
I'm Siobhán Fletcher, and I'll see you next week.
That's just the way you make me feel.